You are watching the GridIronStuds Show, where we talk college football and college football recruiting. I'm Chad Wilson, owner of GridIronStuds.com and the Gridiron Studs app. If you are a high school football player looking to play at the next level, you need to download that Gridiron Studs app right now. Get it on your phone. College football recruiters are looking for their next playmakers all over the field, and they're using the Gridiron Studs app to do that. All right. Happy to be back here with you guys. We're doing the show about 1.5 per month, if I could say that. But this will pick up as we start to move closer and closer to the season and get into the season because, the stories will be coming fast and furious. Not that there is now ever an off season in college football, as the NIL dealings and the transfer portal has kept a good amount of news and content out there for people like me and a host of others. So let's just jump right into it. I was scrolling around, as you do, on social media. All of us do. And I saw a list of the top all-time college football rivalries that were on there. And I mean, the list went, I want to say 50 deep. And there was one particular rivalry that I didn't see in there in the top 50. Now, look, again, it was 50 of them. I may have missed it, but I combed that list with a fine-tooth comb and did not find it. And which rivalry am I talking about? It's the one that I played in 3 times, and that is Florida State versus Miami. Now, not only did this rivalry used to decide the champion of the state of Florida back in the day, but it would often decide the national champion. The 80s into the early 90s, that was the case. Florida State versus Miami. Winner is playing for the national title and most of the time would end up winning it. So, yes, things are definitely not the same in this day and age, and both programs have had some down years. Florida State an atrocious year last year, but Florida State the year before had a chance to go play for a national championship, or at least get into college football playoffs, and suffered some unfortunate circumstances at the end of the year with their quarterback. Last year, Miami, in the thicket of things, had a Heisman Trophy candidate for the entire season, the number 1 overall pick in this year's NFL draft in the form of Cam Ward. So you would say both programs are relevant. And to be honest, maybe you could say, from build up from years ago, everything that was done through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s will be relevant going forward for an extended period of time. But nevertheless, to not have that rivalry in your top 50 seems insane to me. That seems like it would be a rivalry that's in the top 10. So I'm going to just ask a question here to the people watching, and, I'll give my own opinion on this, biased as it may be, but I want you guys to rank the following rivalries for me. All right, that's Ohio State versus Michigan, USC versus UCLA, Texas versus Oklahoma, Miami versus FSU, and Auburn versus Alabama. All right, now these are all marquee programs in college football. I've hit just about every region here, okay? We've hit the North, the South, the East, and the West. I just want you guys out there watching this to rank those rivalries 1 through 5, all right? Here's my ranking of this. And I think a lot of this, how you rank this, is going to depend on how old you are, how long you've been watching college football, and what you have seen happen in these rivalries. I really think it comes down to that. Unless you're a young guy that has done a great amount of research, either by reading books or watching stuff on YouTube, and you're just into it, your ranking of this is really going to just boil down to your personal experience. So being a guy of vast experience in college football, at this point over 4 decades of watching college football, this is how I shake this down. Number 5 on that list for me is USC versus UCLA. And now you're talking to a guy who, though I'm not from California, graduated from high school in California and began his college football career in California. So tough for me to put USC versus UCLA at number 5 on that, but given how it stacks up versus the other rivalries that I've mentioned, that's where I think it falls. Now, mind you, I'm graduating high school where that rivalry was, I don't want to say at its height, but at a really pivotal moment in its time. 1989, I'm a high school student, and Troy Aikman is battling Rodney Peete, UCLA versus USC, and those were the kind of battles that were had in that time. In the mid to late 80s into the 90s, USC versus UCLA was a big thing. And how a rivalry is a big thing? It appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated, who really is just not even around anymore. But there are some covers out there with a UCLA or USC player on the cover after that matchup. So it was a really, really big deal. But considering the other matchups that I've mentioned here and rivalries that I've mentioned here, USC versus UCLA falls at number 5. Number 4 for me, all right, and this might cause a stir, Texas versus Oklahoma. If you're in the Midwest part of this country, if you're from Texas or you're from Oklahoma, you are prompted to type something crazy in the comment section or cut this off. But when I go through the whole totality of this in my lifetime, that's where I fit Texas versus Oklahoma. Texas has had way too many down years, and I really think the glory days of Texas football preceded me watching football. Oklahoma definitely was dominant in the late 70s, early 80s. So, that was a big thing of it. But for me, that's where it falls. Number 4. Number 3 for me is actually the one that I mentioned and the one that I played in, Miami versus Florida State. I just gave you guys the rundown on the history of it, just how much it mattered in the 90s, in the 80s, and what it meant not only to the state of Florida, but to college football, not only what it meant for college football championships, but the players that came out of it and what they were able to do, not only in those games, not only in college football, but at the next level. If you really just sat down here and ran through a list of the players that played in the Miami versus Florida State rivalry from 1984, let's say, to 1994, or even extended it out to the year 2001, it would be insane. I would dare say there were more pros, more first-round draft picks, more Hall of Famers than any other of these rivalries that I've discussed. It might even have more than, cutting out Auburn and Alabama, more than all of those others combined over that time period. So, and you might even be able to include Auburn and Alabama in that time period. Number 2 for me is Michigan versus Ohio State. One of the all-time rivalries. And if you have been to that part of the country, you understand the disdain that both of these schools have for each other. You can't even mention the other schools by name when you're in that specific state or in that particular town where the college is located. They say the team's up north or the team down south. And like what I said about Miami and Florida State, the number of Hall of Fame type players, college football legends, first-round picks, draft picks that have played in that rivalry, especially of late. They've kind of owned the last couple of years. Hard not to have them highly ranked. And many can debate Michigan and Ohio State being number 1. But I've given that honor to Auburn and Alabama. Again, in my experience and lifetime, there was a heyday period for this matchup, which was in the 80s. But in the mid-2000s up till now, this was just about everything. And you start thinking about the types of legendary players that have played in this, and the amount of titles that are had between these two teams just over the last 2-3 decades. It is kind of amazing, the teams that have matched up in there and just the kind of battles that we've had, the legendary things that have happened in this, they call it the Iron Bowl, what Cam Newton was able to do and come back that one year, the year he won the Heisman Trophy, and they won a national championship. You're thinking about the kick six and all the other things that have happened in this rivalry. I rate Auburn versus Alabama as the number 1. But how do you guys rank them? Go ahead and drop your comment down below. How do you stack up those rivalries right there? Michigan versus Ohio State, USC versus UCLA, Texas versus Oklahoma, Miami versus FSU, Auburn versus Alabama. How do you rank them? I would love to know. Staying close to that topic, I've got a little trivia for you guys, something else that you can answer for me down in the comment section below. I'm going to name 5 teams for you, and I want you guys to tell me, out of these 5 teams, who do you think have the most bowl wins in history? All right. Some of you may think you have an easy answer to this. Maybe it is easy. Maybe it's not. But I just want to see what people think here. So without looking this up, out of these 5 teams right here, which team do you think has the most bowl wins in history? University of Georgia, USC, University of Southern California, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Texas. Obviously, these are blue blood programs who have had, at some point in time in their long storied history, they've been one of the most dominant teams in college football at some point, whether that's for a 2-year period, 5-year period, or maybe even a 10-year period. Out of those 5 teams, and I'm going to mention them again, University of Georgia, USC, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Texas, who do you think out of those 5 teams have had the most bowl game victories in their history? Just interested. Just throwing that out there as a trivia question. Don't email me your replies to this. Hit the comment section. Tell me, guys, who you think out of those 5 teams have the most bowl victories of all time. Time to talk about the Rivals rankings, team rankings. I found these interesting. I think I mentioned this on the All Eyes DB Camp on the Indie Drills podcast, talking about DBs and what USC has been able to do in terms of recruiting cornerbacks. They have 3 of the top 10 cornerbacks in high school football in the class of 2026 committed to them right now. Whether or not they're able to hold those commitments, we will see. But right now, USC heads the Rivals recruiting rankings. They're number 1 right now. Is anyone out here surprised by that? Was there any indication as we started to round up and get to the end of the 2024 season that USC would be the team leading in the recruiting rankings? Now, I know we've got quite a ways to go, and there'll be probably some jockeying for position there. But right now, they're holding that number 1 spot. What do you guys think is, leading that charge for USC? What is going on there? Number 2 is Notre Dame. Another shocker for me. They're just typically not up there, at least not of, recent history, memory. They're just not a team that finds themselves in the top 5 like that. But of course, playing in that final game will indeed do that for you. Ohio State, they're always hanging around there. If they're not 1 or 2, they're 3, and that's where they are right now. Ohio State continuing to do things. I thought they'd be 1 or 2, but again, we still got a lot of time to go because Ohio State is absolutely – they've done one thing better than everyone else over the last 5 years. It's been recruiting, talking about Ohio State there. So they're number 3. Number 4 is Clemson. Dabo Swinney, he of the, I'm going to continue to recruit high school football. I'm not going to be so much in the transfer portal, that type of thing. Maybe it's paying off for him. Clemson is number 4 overall. And number 5, Penn State, they had a nice season, they made it into the 12-team playoff and got some extended news, you could say, extended coverage. And so that has been able to help them. They are in the top 5. I just wonder, Penn State can put together 2 or 3 classes in a row that are inside that top 5. What really is going to happen there? I know James Franklin catches a lot of flack, doesn't win the big game, doesn't get it done. I'm not sure what folks expect out of Penn State. Maybe, the older folk are a little bit spoiled by what Joe Paterno was able to do. We live in a different world. We live in a different time in college football and recruiting. I'm not sure what people expect someone head coaching at Penn State to do, recruiting-wise and overall-wise. I mean, there isn't, unless you're going to open up the purse strings and you are going to drop a lot of NIL money, I'm not sure how you can continue to have top classes rolling into a place like Happy Valley. I mean, has anyone ever been there? Have you ever been through what you need to go through to get to Penn State's campus? I have. Not a whole lot around there. So outside of the tradition, the good coaching that you're going to get, it's a difficult sell. I'm just being honest about it. So the fact that they're even in this top 5, and if someone like James Franklin can continue to put up top five classes, they have to be a well-coached football team, right? And there are people that are ready to fight with me over that because maybe you don't like James Franklin's game day decisions. I mean, he's not working with the kind of talent that Michigan and Ohio State are working with in their own conference. And I know people will look at him and say, "What?" Because you're thinking about their defensive line and their edge rushers that they get and the occasional running back that comes through there. But all units and roster from top to bottom, Penn State doesn't measure up in terms of, if we were going by stars and all that kind of good stuff, they don't exactly measure up to Ohio State and Michigan in that conference. And now USC and Oregon are a part of it. I'm not sure they measure up there as well. Probably need to do a little bit of research as to where they have fallen in terms of recruiting rankings versus those four teams that I just named that are currently part of the Big Ten. So I find that very interesting. But that's your top five in terms of team recruitings right now. USC 1, Notre Dame 2, Ohio State 3, Clemson number 4, and Penn State rounding out the top 5. Now on to really pressing matters. High school football stadiums. Georgia's Buford High School made a big stir this week with by releasing a video of their new football stadium that they have built. Just not wanting to be outdone by the state of Texas. Georgia is jumping in there, and I've been trying to tell people this. Georgia high school football has been on a steady rise over the last few years. And I know my folks down here in South Florida especially continue to say that football is king in Florida and Florida is dominant in the high school football scene throughout the country. That may still be true, but let's not disrespect some of these other areas. And one of those is Georgia as well as the DMV area. But my focus right now is on Georgia and Buford High School Stadium, which runs a price tag of $62 million to build. And that is promising to be ready for this 2025 season when it comes up. Why does it cost $62 million? Well, there's a good reason for that. It took 8 months to complete, which is kind of fast for me. Anyone ever try to get a building permit to do anything on their house? That alone takes 8 months. But when it comes to football in Georgia, they get things done. So 8 months it has taken to build. It has the biggest video board of any high school football stadium in all of the land. Do you hear me, Texas? Texas is going to respond to this. Some high school out in Texas is going to have to make a bigger video board than the one that's going to be at Buford, which currently sits as the biggest one in all of the country in high school football. They have luxury suites for you folks down here in South Florida that attend football games. Your mind continues to be blown by things like this because you're on metal bleachers, and I don't care who the game is. The biggest games down here in South Florida get played at Traz Powell Stadium, which would not blow anyone away, especially if you're from Georgia or Texas coming down here to play a game, given the venues that you guys play in. Even folks out in California wouldn't exactly be blown away by, the Mecca, as we call it down here, Traz Powell Stadium. But the on-field product continues to be top of the line. Let's just leave it at that. But Buford High School has luxury suites you will not find at any high school football stadium here in the state of Florida. So luxury suites. And these guys' facilities were already great. They have 6 practice fields. We didn't have 6 practice fields when I was at the University of Miami. And those guys down there still don't. So I wonder what kind of withdrawal high school football players in places like Georgia and Texas have when they go on to play college football and they're not playing it at one of the mega schools that are out there. If you don't go to a Texas or an Oklahoma, or you're not going to Ohio State or Michigan or, one of the bigger schools out there, you're not at Clemson, you're not at one of these other places with the facilities. So let's say you go the FCS route or in the Group of 5 route, or God forbid, Division II. How do guys feel leaving out of high school football in these areas where, you played and had facilities like this and things are a step back? I really, really would wonder about that. But I mean, kudos to Buford High School. I mean, if you have the resources, I have long talked about how I wish the state of Florida would puld more effort into and provide more resources for high school high schools down here playing football. Obviously, the coaches need to get paid more, but I would like to see more of a big deal made by the state about high school football. Certainly, I'm not calling for a $62 million stadium to be built. That will not happen in my lifetime in the state of Florida. But I think something like this is awesome. And, Buford probably deserves something like that. In the grand scheme of things, they were a 12-2 team last year. Now, mind you, they were ranked number 3 in the state of Georgia. That just goes to show you what I've said about Georgia football. A school that was 12-2 and can afford and is willing to spend $62 million on a stadium was not the number 1 team in Georgia. It was the 3rd ranked team in Georgia. We'll see what they come up with there. In case you're wondering, is this the most expensive high school stadium that has been built to this point? If we're just talking in real dollars, not adjusting anything for inflation, it is not. That title is still held in the grand and great state of Texas, where everything is bigger. And Katy High School, Legacy Stadium in Katy High School, cost $89 million to build. I would encourage you guys, and I should probably do a video on this, but I would encourage you guys to go look up some of these stadiums. I thought Eagle Stadium was, perhaps the prettiest and the best stadium that I'd seen for high school football back when it was built, but Katy's stadium, I had a chance to look at, looks awesome. And this one being built by Buford High School looks outstanding. So high school stadiums are starting to become a thing. And you're getting press boxes. High school football, though the recruiting of it has taken a back seat, the hoopla surrounding it has not wavered at all. It is still a big deal. It is still content. It is there. You're still going to see games on ESPN. And we're still seeing that trending up. So, we'll see more stadiums like this being built. And it's going to be interesting to see how maybe some of these other places around the country respond to that. I don't think we're going to have a big facilities war like we saw several years ago in college football. That became a really big thing. But people will respond. There's, competition. It's athletic. So competition is kind of the word. And that's just the kind of feeling around it. So we'll see what other teams and schools in Georgia do. Will they spend more money than this $62 million? Are we going to have a run on high school football stadiums getting bigger and grander, bigger video boards, bigger press boxes, and just capacity? No word on the capacity here for Buford Stadium coming up. I would venture to say probably around 15,000. I think Katy Stadium holds 12 to 15,000. So, you spend $62 million in Georgia. That's probably what you're looking at. So keep an eye out for that. All right, and finally, closing things out on this shortened edition of the Gridiron Stud Show. One of the major things that I'm doing here is trying to give recruiting advice. I will continue to say this, that it is getting more and more difficult to get recruited in high school football to go play college football because of all of the changes that have been made in college football, stuff with the NIL and the transfer portal, where seemingly more and more schools are going there first before they go the high school route to fill rosters. There's a number of reasons for that. First of all, it's just, to be honest, you're getting a player that's already been on a college campus, and so that he can at least survive there. He's been in a college program. He's been through the regiment, so you're getting a player who's experienced, so to speak. Even if he didn't get on the field, he's at least gone to a situation where he's on campus and he's gone through the routine and regimen of being a college football player. That means going to classes, going to workouts, getting through the meetings and all that. Because whether you guys realize it or not, there is a pretty high flame out rate when it comes to high school players going to college, higher than you probably think. So you got a player that's been through all that and could at least handle that part of it. That's one reason. Another reason is, listen, college football coaches are under more pressure now to win than ever before. So if you can fill a hole in your roster with a guy that's been in college football already for a year or two, or a guy that's even played, gotten out on the field, or even played at a higher level. See, when the transfer portal first opened up, it was mostly guys who were disgruntled at their place. And the number one reason guys get disgruntled at their college that they chose out of high school is that they weren't able to get out on the field. Those were most of the guys you saw going into the transfer portal outside of the regular quarterbacks who must transfer because someone else beat them out for the job. That's mostly what you saw in the transfer portal. Guys unhappy about their playing time who just really didn't get on the field, et cetera, et cetera. Over time, as NIL got introduced more and more into this, we've got all types of guys going into the transfer portal. So you'll see guys that were top players at a top school jumping now into the transfer portal. And because of that, holes in rosters now had the opportunity to be filled by guys who not only have been through the college football regimen of going to school, going to class, and doing all the meetings, guys who have actually gotten on the field, played college football at a high level, and now are available to come to someone else's team and fill a void where there is one. A big example of that is a number 1 overall draft pick this year, and that was Cam Ward, coming from Washington State to the University of Miami, and obviously it paid big dividends for both Cam Ward as well as the school. So that's another reason why schools are opting to go into the transfer portal first before going to look for a high school player who may or may not be able to hack it, even if a guy's a 5-star. All right, 5 stars flame out too. Maybe that's not news to you. If it's the first time you're hearing it, though, believe me on that. 5 stars flame out more often than you think. So when you've got a guy who has been in college football and is experienced and has done it, it just stands to reason you'd want to go get that guy first, especially if you are under some kind of pressure as a coach. And virtually all of these coaches are. There are only a handful of guys out there that I would say are not really feeling any intense pressure. I mean, even Ryan Day, the national championship coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, had a warm seat going into last season. So, I can, off the top of my head, I think of 2 guys who might be comfortable in their spots, and it's Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney. Those are probably the 2 most comfortable guys in their spot. They were talking a lot of trash about Lincoln Riley out west at the beginning of the year. Dan Lanning as well. I will add him to the mix. He's probably a guy that's pretty comfortable going into this season, head coach of Oregon. But outside of that, everyone's feeling a certain amount of pressure coming into the 2025 season. And when you feel pressure, you got to make moves that have to hit, and they got to hit fast. And that means going to the transfer portal over high school football. So what do we do here? That means there has to be a little bit more focus by parents and high school football players when it comes to your whole strategy for trying to get recruited, because there's a lot more competition. It's a lot more difficult. And I think as I talk to the younger group here, you freshmen or guys coming in, if you're trying to get ahead of the game, I think you have to formulate a plan that looks like, as I enter into high school, I'm trying to get the attention of any college. All right. Don't walk into this with a big head, any college, because what you think often does not match with the reality of college football recruiting. I venture to say 7 times out of 10, maybe even higher than that, that is the case. What you think about college football recruiting, what you think about your own abilities as it relates to how you will be recruited, often does not match up with the reality of it. And that kills a lot of guys at the end. Okay. So you're just trying to get attention from any school at that point. So when you come in, you're looking to develop yourself. You're looking to catch the eye of coaches. If you have the ability in the off season to go visit a few places, you start off with some of these smaller schools. Okay. Go to the smaller schools locally. As you continue to develop yourself, you're not trying to go to Ohio State, and you're not trying to go to Notre Dame, and you're not trying to go to Texas early on in your recruiting process, unless you're just trying to go there and get a little bit of experience, have a good time. Unless you are a huge player, let's say you're a huge offensive lineman who's 6'3", 6'4", as a freshman, or you're a guy with unusual skill at an early age, you're a 4'3" guy, you're one of these 10'5" freshmen that are running around the country, or, size and speed is off the charts comparative to others at your age range, I would venture to say that, if money and time is an issue, I wouldn't go to those places early on in my career. I would try to go places where I would be, where I would attract some attention, right? Because you want a little bit of momentum. So instead of Michigan, you go to Western Michigan, right? Instead of Ohio State, maybe you go to Bowling Green or something like that. And you go to one of those camps and you just get used to the idea of competing, being in front of college coaches. Maybe you catch their attention. Maybe they start looking to you towards the future, and you just kind of continue to develop yourself at home through all of the other things that I've talked about here, whether it's 7-on-7 for skill guys or track for skill guys, and continue to work in the weight room if you're one of these guys in the trenches, and continue to up your IQ about the game of football. Let's not forget about that. So you continue your development there, and you actually get on the field and you start playing and you see how you develop. Now then maybe you can adjust the types of schools that you're looking to gain attention from. But this has to be a level up process. I would say you don't want to start off up here with the Ohio States and the Texases and Notre Dames and the Clemsons, if you're in those areas, and then, start working yourself back down. You want the attention of these schools that will pay attention to you early on, because momentum is a thing. All right. Recruiting momentum is a thing. And I would venture to say, as you continue to move through this process from your freshman year to your sophomore year to your junior year, you continue to have contacts with these coaches. It's not one of these things where you get the attention of Western Michigan and maybe you get an offer from them as a freshman, and now your sophomore year has just completed and you start getting attention from Michigan. You just, put a hand in the face of Western Michigan, or you just totally blow them off. There's a number of reasons why you don't want to do that, because you never know how things are going to play out over your last few seasons of high school football. You may level off as a player. Those things happen. You may get injured, in which case these upper schools are going to start to fall off of you in most cases. And the other part is, coaches at Western Michigan can be coaches at Michigan. Coaches at West Florida can end up being coaches at, Georgia. You just never know. Coaches are very mobile. They move around. Guys change jobs they change about as much as the players now at this point, and you just never know. So you don't want to blow up. These guys are human. All right. While it probably shouldn't affect them like that, you never know. All right. You blow a guy off when he was really trying to, get his recruiting momentum going when he was at a smaller school, and you just put a hand in his face, or you were disrespectful or non-responsive or whatever. And then he ends up being a coach at one of your major schools that you're trying to go to that's showing you interest. You would have screwed yourself. So you keep your contact, you keep talking. I know it can kind of be much. You do want to have your life as a youngster, but you're in the business of trying to be a college football player. This is part of it. So some sacrifices need to be made. You should keep your connection with all of these coaches. The ones you started off with, as I told you in the beginning here, the smaller schools, the smaller school coach, you keep those contacts as you start to level up, you start to play on the field. Don't get the big head, because I have seen situations where guys leveled off and the big school started to fall off of them. Yeah, it was cool to throw an offer out there. Offers aren't binding, folks. By them giving you an offer doesn't mean they're bound to turn that into a scholarship offer that you are allowed to accept. There's nothing binding them to that. And I've definitely seen schools stiff-arm guys going down the road. They might give you an offer or pay attention to you as a freshman or a sophomore off of what they think your potential is going to be. And in their eyes, you don't reach that potential your junior year. They're going to fall back. There are going to be other guys maybe that they are more interested in, and they stop returning your phone calls. They stop calling you. And now you've got to go crawling, tail tucked between your legs, to one of these other schools that you blew off. You could find yourself like someone playing musical chairs without a place to put your rear end at the end. I've seen that happen. Guys sitting in the stands as opposed to being on stage on National Signing Day because they just mismanaged this whole process. Put the work in, put the time in, and this is how you should graduate through the process. So that's just my big message that I want to give to the parents and players that are watching this. This is how you should go about this, in my strong opinion, especially with the way things are right now. You can end up being recruited by some of these upper schools as you get into your junior year, and it still may not be the best place for you. You might be a fringe player, not someone they're thinking about first. And so if you're one of these fringe players, I have been advising guys, just based off of things that I've seen both in training defensive backs, which gives me a bigger picture of how things are going on these campuses. You're going to probably get more solid coaching at one of these smaller schools because those coaches tend to stay there longer. And there's a little bit more focus on development over just having a coach coaching a position group because he's a good recruiter. He might not be the best developer of talent that's currently on the roster. He's really good at bringing in great talent to add to that roster, but so far as developing that talent while they're on the roster, actually at the school, that might not be a strong point. And if you're a fringe player, that's what you need. You need development. Otherwise, how else are you going to catch these guys that were ahead of you coming out of high school? If these guys were ahead of you skill-wise, development-wise, coming out of high school, and you go where they go and they get the kind of coaching that they get, when you could have gone somewhere else and continue to work on your skills and development and possibly be coached by the same coach for 2, 3, 4 years, however long it takes, how are you going to catch them? The way to catch them is by doing that, because these smaller schools, the only way that they can really compete is to go headfirst into development of their players, right? So they don't actually have a 5-star player when they get them on campus. It's their job to turn that player, whether he's a 3 or 4-star or maybe a no star, into a 5-star type player. So they go heavy on coaching. That is something I strongly suggest to you guys. And you fringe guys that think you're going to get big NIL contracts or NIL contracts at all, you'll be surprised when you find out that you don't get any of those. So you're there on a roster with guys who are getting NIL money. So that's already a problem, because you just have to know politics says those guys getting money need to get all the looks in terms of trying to get on the field versus you that has a very small NIL deal or no NIL deal at all. And you could be wasting a lot of time when you could be on another campus with another school and another coach that's there that's going to really help you with your development. What I've seen over the last 3 years in training defensive backs coming out for the draft is these smaller school guys tend to have better skills when we get to that point. They've been coached by the same guy. There's been heavy skill development. They just seem to be better skilled guys. You can take that to the bank with you. But that's just a little insight into how I think you guys as young players and parents of these young players should probably play things as you enter into high school, or you just have just completed that first year of high school. That's how I think you guys should look at things. If you have any questions at all about the recruiting process, feel free to drop your questions in the comment section down below, or send me an email to cwilson@GridIronStuds.com, and I would be sure to help you in any way that I can. All right, that's going to wrap things up for this edition of the Gridiron Studs Show. Appreciate you guys listening to and watching. If you are new to the show, whether you're streaming it on one of the podcasters, streaming devices out there, Apple's, Spotify, Anchor, whatever you're listening to this on, or you're watching me on YouTube, I encourage you guys to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next show like this one. If you're watching on YouTube, like, share, hit that comment section. I got a number of things that I'd like to hear from you guys from. Would appreciate you doing that. All right, that's it for me. Till next time, Gridiron Studs, be seen.